An international team of military and political experts have come together to create a plan to stop missile attacks in Ukraine. Let's talk about SkyShield. SkyShield represents the first serious effort to formulate what a practical security guarantee for Ukraine would look like. The plan introduces SkyShield and the creation of what is called an Integrated Air Protection Zone, or an IAPZ, and would employ combat air patrols to patrol the skies over western Ukraine, or CAPS, CAPS. The plan is to mobilize 120 NATO and partner aircraft to patrol the skies in western Ukraine, allowing the Ukrainian military to free up resources from western Ukraine to not just protect eastern frontline cities and towns, but also to move military assets to retake the currently occupied territories, allowing Ukraine the capacity to win the war. The authors argue that this would be more effective than sending 10,000 ground troops. They argue this will have three main pillars of impact. Military impacts, as I've already argued, political impacts, sending a clear message to the Russian Federation that Europe is willing to defend Europe, and it significantly lowers European personnel commitments required for mission success compared to ground troop deployments. Third, socioeconomic impacts, protects vital export corridors, increases investor confidence in industry within the IAPZ, and also raises public confidence and encourages refugees to return to Ukraine. The idea is to use a coalition of the willing outside of NATO auspices, because this is the importance of this moment, is to be quick and flexible. And especially when you have a United States that is not dedicated to the protection of Ukraine, it means NATO is effectively hobbled by its major partner, its one key member, being unwilling to protect and participate in its activities. The planners also intend for the SkyShield to be integrated into a post-war situation or an armistice or ceasefire. This would also be necessary for any future security commitments to Ukraine, that their skies are safe from rocket and drone attacks. This would also allow for the protection of 4 major nuclear power plants in western Ukraine, and also the protection of energy production and the repair of energy production, something that has been critically damaged in the last years, where people spend a lot of nights without power in areas. And even during the daytime, power comes and goes, and rationing has been something that has been consistent and constant over these many months. The report argues that Russian military power sits on top of 3 pillars. The first pillar is incessant infantry attacks with mechanized support. The second is glide bombs to destroy Ukrainian positions, clearing the way for infantry attacks as well as destroying settlements close to the front line. The third is attritional drone and missile attacks across the depth of territory of Ukraine, aimed at breaking the morale of the Ukrainian people. SkyShield, they argue, will contribute to eroding each and every one of these pillars. The authors also make a strong argument for why this would be a successful operation and plan. That it will not involve conflict with Russia in a conventional or nuclear way. That it can be done because the West has organized and sustained much more extensive air campaigns in the recent past. And most importantly, that SkyShield would be politically legal and also politically possible to get done. For the last 21 years, NATO has been patrolling the skies in the Baltics from Russian aggression, and in that time there have been 0 incidents. Likewise, during the Western Air Campaign in Syria, the Russian Air Force was studious in making sure that they never came into conflict with the US-led air forces. Even the Assad regime's air defense systems rarely shot at coalition forces, while they were simultaneously engaging Israeli aircraft. Likewise, Turkey actually shot down a Russian fighter in 2015, and I'm not sure if you're aware, there was no nuclear conflict in that one. Actually, the only retaliation was an icing of diplomatic communications and some sanctions. There was no actual recompense or military response. Further, the Russian Federation has not been using its aircraft past the front line since 2022 for the most part, so the likelihood of them engaging directly with this proposed coalition would be very, very low, and they would be separated by 200 kilometers. The authors note that failure to move now on SkyShield will embolden Russia to continue its destruction of Ukraine and eventually attack NATO member states. SkyShield represents the lowest risk, highest impact measure European allies can take now to end this war sooner and prevent war between NATO and Russia. The report also addresses Russia's well-known tactic of using nuclear blackmail to prevent other countries from assisting Ukraine in larger ways. And as we have seen, Even with the Ukrainian army literally invading part of Russia and occupying it for many months at this point, they have not resorted into some grand escalation other than having their ally North Korea send troops to assist in fighting against Ukraine. There was again no nuclear war as a result of Ukraine literally holding and taking part of Russia. The report notes there are probably 3 realistic red lines for Putin that need to be taken into account. Attacks upon the economic center, as in Moscow and the surrounding region. 2, an attempt on Putin's life or his leadership. And the third would be a preemptive nuclear strike on Russia. All of these, they say, are not remotely within anything they would want to have done or to be done, as they themselves internally see these as red lines that they should not cross. They note that Russia will of course respond to the IAPZ with hybrid means, as it cannot answer with any efficient military escalation beyond what it already has in place. Cyber attacks, propaganda, and attempts to sabotage key infrastructure will be attempted, but with limited results should coalition members make use of their technological advantages. A predictable increase of pressure on the coalition in the Baltics and elsewhere, like flying more sorties of antiquated T-95s to strain air defenses or GPS signal interference, should be anticipated and planned for as part of IAPZ implementation. So let's get back to these 120 planes. They're proposing 120 F-16s, F-16AM BMs, or a operational equivalent provided by squadrons of any other aircraft types. The EU and Great Britain have enough combat power to independently establish the IAPZ. For some perspective, the 1999 air campaign in Kosovo to stop the genocide there, that took 1,000 aircraft. So 120 with a support craft, significantly less. The authors also propose paying for this with frozen Russian assets and also the various financial mechanisms being proposed in various nations and the European Union right now. To make this proposal legally sound on international law, they propose that it abides by the Convention on Assistance in the case of a nuclear accident and radiological emergency, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, the Chicago Convention on International Civil Aviation. The first is particularly relevant as the Russian Federation has had consistent and repeat attacks upon energy infrastructure, including the reactors used by Ukraine to power homes. Further, the authors also note that it will be vital, important combat experience for all of the pilots involved, in the case things do go poorly in the future. And here's everyone who contributed. And the rest. SkyShield is a plan to force Russia back to the negotiating table, for Ukraine to regain all of its territory, and to return peace back to Europe with deterrence and defense. I think it might be a great idea to close the skies over Ukraine. Now, please do some engagement or else nobody's gonna see and I don't get paid. Thank you.